Good evening, everybody. If you can hear me clearly and you have access to the chat roll, could you just type in to let me know that you can hear us clearly? Thank you.
Hello there, welcome to this session. I'm going to be starting very shortly. This is really to prove that you can see me, that it's a live session, because I will be switching to slides shortly so that it's easier on you. It's easier for you to kind of take notes on things if you want to, but also kind of let things digest and go in. So it's great to see so many of you on. I'm sorry I'm peering at this feed at the moment, which is the live chat. It's absolutely brilliant to see lots of you on, ready to go in a moment's time. So, see, I'm still peering. Yep, fantastic. Saying no. Hello, hello, hello. Yep, everyone's having a little bit of a chat. Right, so I believe we are about to start. Okay, so I will disappear in a second. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, and then I'm not here. Okay, so welcome to this session, Why You Can't Let Things Go, Even If You've Obsessed Over It and Asked a Dozen Friends. Now, before we start, this is, as you can expect, the kind of housekeeping that I'm supposed to be mentioning, okay, which is on your screen right now. But what I'm actually going to say as far as housekeeping is concerned is something very different. What I say in this session some of it you'll disagree with. And some of it you'll think, that's a different way of looking at things, okay? But what I say is a way. It's not the way. And those of you who know me well will be thinking, yeah, absolutely, it's a way, it's not the way. That's how I like to look at things and how I take things forward. Therefore, you take what resonates and you leave to one side what doesn't resonate, okay? I'm very much known for prodding and stimulating the unconscious for change. But you must remember that I'm here for the people who make an effort in life, but feel currently perhaps unrewarded. So, perhaps in life right now, you feel that you really make an effort, you really try, and you keep feeling unrewarded. I'm here to help support your kindness and decency, and for you to see that it's a real positive, okay, that your sensitivity is absolutely your greatest asset. You are, those people who feel sometimes unrewarded for your kindness and decency are sensitives, okay, and intuitive sensitives. And I very much am here to help you as a sensitive reveal and discover what's been holding you up and help you resolve it, okay? And it's not with logic, so you must remember that, Hopefully you'll see this session as, oh great, it's appealed to a side of me that works for me, rather than things that are hugely logical, because logic bores the pants off a sensitive, okay, because it doesn't inspire the side of you, the part of you that works really well and really digests things in a comfortable way, okay? Sensitives operate as a right brain preference person, okay? It doesn't mean that you only operate from your right brain and your scatty and whatever else is associated with right brain. Doesn't mean that at all. It means that you have a preference in that particular area, which means your emotions, your inner symbolism is amazingly creative. It never fails to amaze me in all the sessions that I do, and especially when working with people, how their psyche is able to give them such amazing pictures, imagery, things that I couldn't make up. Okay, and that is one of the things of being a sensitive. Your capacity for empathy makes that very easy, because the right hemisphere likes to talk in images, okay? It likes to talk in images, it likes to talk in symbolism, and it likes to talk in repeating experiences. So what are the rules? Okay, the rules are, you are here because you want the confidence to allow yourself permission, okay? Permission to work deeply with yourself and get to the space of not just a little shift, but transformation. Listen and watch this session with an open mind. I'm certainly not here to persuade you on anything. So if you sat there bracing yourself thinking, oh my God, she's going to persuade me on something, I'm not here to persuade you on anything. I'm here to provide a service for what I would have loved to have received when I was in the position of feeling scared, bewildered, and utterly unsupported. And I'm not saying that that's your reality right now, but it was my reality, and it's one of my driving forces to make sure that I provide a service that I would have loved to have had when I was right at that point of opening up, flourishing, and finding a deeper aspect of myself that I hadn't previously come across. Okay, so if you like a deeper perspective and, I'm afraid, a non-fluffy but kind approach, then absolutely you're in the right place. Right place always for these kind of sessions. So get ready to let your mind and your ears be open for this session. Let's start. Okay, so you want to let things go, to be able to stop obsessing when someone or something impacts you. Now there is a problem, okay? And the problem is you see other people merely unaffected, yet for you things stay, especially when it's emotionally charged, or that you feel that someone has been wronged, or you didn't have your say. This is where things really stick for you, and it is an issue as far as letting go is concerned. And it does leave you, as this picture depicts, feeling that, oh, what's going on? Am I some kind of child that feels left unrewarded? It makes you feel uncomfortable on the inside. Now, this happens for two reasons, okay? There's two things going on. It's likely that you have a right hemisphere preference, okay? I'm not going to say, yes, you definitely have, but it's highly likely that you have a right hemisphere preference. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this session. It wouldn't be something that you would find of interest, okay? What that means is your brain shows you messages in pictures, feelings, and reruns of situations rather than words. Or if it does show you as words, it's kind of reruns of those things running through your mind, which means it's really tough to let things go because you're flooded on occasion with all of these different scenarios, situations, reruns, pictures, feelings, wondering if they're yours, someone else's, or what on earth's going on. You even become tongue-tied when you're trying to communicate something that's important to you. Therefore, when you're nervous or excited, okay, so all those things happen really when you're either feeling nervous or excited. It's that kind of feeling where you suddenly go blank, you don't really know, you think, oh, what am I doing, what am I doing, what am I doing? And then it goes round and round and round and round, and the feeling goes round with it, okay? And that, the right hemisphere, is where we feel things in terms of our emotions, and it shows an imagery. It doesn't verbalize, okay? It's our left hemisphere that verbalizes things. So when you get tongue-tied, it's when your right hemisphere is trying to process something. Now, the second reason is because what's called your HPA axis is hyper-responsive. Now, rather than you think, oh, she's starting to get technical. No, I'm not. I'll briefly explain what that means. Your HPA regulates stress hormones, okay? So what is your HPA axis? It's your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your adrenal regulation, okay? How does it work? Well, it's a bit like a heating or a cooling system, okay? So just imagine this. Obviously, I'm using your right brain preference here. Imagine that you have a thermostat, okay? Pipes and an outlet. So let's say those are radiators. Okay, so the thermostat is the hypothalamus, the pipes are your pituitary, and the outlet, okay, is your adrenals. So those, so as I say, we'll call those the radiators. So imagine, okay, this is how it affects your HPA axis. Imagine that someone is standing in your hallway, okay, messing with your thermostat, twiddling it around, messing with it constantly, turn it up, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down, constantly. That is what an alteration in your HPA regulation is, okay? So those scenarios where you feel like something keeps going round and it won't shut off, and you think, oh God, what's this, and it gets more and more intense, and then it affects your sleep, and then it affects everything, and then it's running around your head, and you wake up with it, you go to sleep with it, and you try and go to sleep, and then it's not, then blah, blah, blah. Imagine that that's what's happening, okay? That in your inner hallway is somebody with their hand firmly on that thermostat, turning it up, turning it down, and winding you up with it, okay? Early life stress, for instance, and I'm not saying that everybody on this session has had early life stress, but for you to be sensitive, it's going to be there somewhere, okay? And I'll go a little bit further into that as we go further into this session. But early life stress, for instance, messes with the thermostat, okay? Now, consistent early life stress, so, you know, more than a little bit, or on a constant basis, really messes with the thermostat, sometimes breaking it, okay? Now, before you think, oh gosh, is it not fixable? Of course it's fixable. Okay, we all have an ability to adjust and change things, but it's not going to do it on its own. So just imagine that. So your HPA axis, being in terms of hyper responsive, is something that is constantly being fired or adjusted or changed all the time, as though someone is standing in your inner hallway messing with the thermostat. This is why it's tough to let things go. And you need to remember that it's not your fault, okay? It's not your fault at all, because you haven't done anything to upset the balance. It's not you. If you're sitting there thinking, oh, what have I done? Have I messed it up? Have I done this? Have I done that? No. It's not your fault. You haven't done anything to upset the balance. That's why it's so frustrating for you as a sensitive, because you really try. You really try, and you really make an effort, and you think, why is this happening? I do this and I do that. No one else seems to have to do this. They seem to be okay with stuff. It's not your fault, okay? You haven't done anything to upset the balance. The responsiveness of the HPA axis, so that inner heating system, the thermostat, the pipes and the radiators, happens for a variety of reasons. And that variety of reasons is connected to your sensitivity. So I'm going to show you in this particular session, because I think this is it's a way of communicating with your right hemisphere, and it's the way it likes to digest information. So I'm going to demonstrate that and how that really works by really kind of telling you stories on how to look at these things, and then giving you a perspective on why that's relevant. Okay, so to give you as an example, my HPA axis when I was a child was very hyper responsive. Okay, now for me it came out as chronic eczema, really chronic eczema, nasty all over. It was really kind of in the one area. It was, my hands were covered in it, so it meant everything to do with my interaction with the world was covered in really bad eczema. Okay, and I also had, see again, it's the hands theme, I also had severe hyperhidrosis. Now what hyperhidrosis is literally hyper, so hydrosis, water, so sweating basically, but it was only ever on my hands. Okay, so I had this severe eczema on my hands, and I also had this severe hyperhidrosis. You can imagine what kind of social interaction that offered. So I found it impossible very much at that particular time to let things go, to the extent I was absolutely a nervous wreck. And I had someone in my metaphorical hallway. I had someone in my metaphorical hallway who was really throwing that dial up. Okay, they was really throwing that dial up and down. Someone, sometimes in life we have something, but I had someone well and truly stood in my hallway, and I would say deliberately throwing that thermostat up and down. Nothing would shift the eczema. And I was supposed to, somehow, whatever, grow out of the hyperhidrosis. Then, okay, it wasn't until I was an adult and I happened to read my medical notes for something. I don't know what it was for. I think it was for an insurance policy. I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was. And I kind of came to a very clear realization. What I saw in those letters was about my hyperhidrosis at the time. They were really kind letters from a GP at the time, whatever, to a surgeon, okay, which was about my particular condition. And I realised, because of that kindness that was written written in there, obviously this was years later, that I realised I wasn't an incapable person that I had thought myself to be. Okay, that I wasn't incapable of getting rid of these things, sorting it out, getting rid of the eczema, getting rid of the hyperhidrosis. I suddenly kind of realised that I wasn't incapable, because someone had shown compassion for my situation, even though I'd never seen these letters until that particular time. But yeah, okay, although at the time the hyperhidrosis had stopped, because I had, by that particular time, when I read those medical notes, had a drastic operation to stop it. But the fact was that I still had the eczema, okay? And it was at that point, and I remember that particular point, that I decided I was worthy of working on the inner world, okay? The inner world. And it had been something that was stewing at the back of my mind since I was, 15, okay? But reading those letters, and often it is when you're going into that place where your system is trying to reset itself, to sort out that thermostat, there is something that occurs in your life to trigger that adjustment. Okay, something, and it can be something really quite small. So for me, it was that kind of reading those letters that had triggered something. And it was absolutely that a stranger had thought that I was worthy. Okay. The inner world was something that had been for quite some time silently talking to me. Yet I couldn't really explain it. And maybe you've had that same experience. You kind of think, something, something's been, or was, maybe you've been working on your inner world for quite some time. But if you haven't been, then maybe it has been something that's just quietly kind of talking to you, but you can't really explain it. And it's sort of a quiet feeling in the distance, and it feels calm, but somewhere over there. It's like somewhere over there. It's like, feels quite over there. I can't quite touch it. And then on occasion you feel it, and then you spend your life trying to make it permanent. Okay. And it was then that I found my voice. But it wasn't it was my inner voice, okay? And that inner voice started as pictures. And it started as flashes of a little girl in rags, okay? And I didn't know her, it's just this little girl I saw. I didn't know her. But the eczema started to disappear. And after 25 years, it was 25 years of raw bloody hands and infections in the wounds, it disappeared, and absolutely it never returned. And I was told at that time I would need more operations for the hyperhidrosis, as the surgery would run out. And I've never had to have them. Okay, I've never had to have those operations. And those operations were 25 years ago. There seems to be a little bit of theme on the 25. Anyway, and all of those adjustments changed. And those strong adjustments in my physical state happened when I started to see the flashes of the little girl in rags. Okay. Now there is a point. Okay, there is a point in telling you this. When you consciously connect with the inner world, stress calms down. Okay. You then start to have some control over who or what throws your thermostat, whether that's up or down. It showed for me first in the physical. That's not for everyone. Okay, sometimes it will show to you more in the emotional field, but I think I needed for it to show for me first in the physical to believe that. Okay, to be comfortable with that. And at that time, that it was with the disappearance of the eczema, and I've never had it since. Okay, it suddenly disappeared. I'm not joking. My hands were absolutely really not pleasant. People used to think I'd been in a severe fire or something, and now they are completely normal and fine. Okay, there's nothing on them. It meant the stress in my system had calmed down enough to let the outer acknowledgement go. Okay, it had let it go. Now, for me, my early life was noticeably stressful. Maybe yours isn't, okay? But countless studies show that not especially sensitive or nurturing early life care, take that as you will, for some people you think, oh yeah, I didn't have very sensitive or nurturing early life care, and it's obvious to you, and to other people it's not quite so obvious. But I'm talking about emotional connection. Some scenarios may well be that there is enough physical care, fed and watered, clothed and all that, but there isn't enough in terms of a connection. And countless, too many to even go into, show that not especially sensitive or nurturing early life care, and I mean early life, and this is something that has only really become apparent in recent years. A lot of these situations have only become apparent in really very recent times, in the last 30, 40 years, okay? Prior to that time, everything was really strongly centered around this whole idea that you don't know anything until you become an adult. So you have no kind of recollection, memory or anything that affects you until you become an adult. It's this whole idea of how your early mechanisms operate that there's no recognition it had any kind of impact. But now, absolutely countless studies show that it has a massive, massive, massive impact, okay? So a not especially sensitive or nurturing early life scenario can mean anything from, that you came from a background where it was argumentative, maybe there was emotional distance, stressful life situations, the obvious things, quite often when they were really obvious things, it's easier to notice. Because when they're not so obvious, they're more subtle and you question them more carefully. You think, I had this really nice foundational experience, so why am I still in this position where I obsess over things, I can't let things go? And yes, I recognise that, Heidi, my thermostat is going in, and my whole radiator systems doesn't know what on earth it's doing. Sometimes the heating's on, sometimes it's off, sometimes it's on when it's hot, and sometimes it's off when it's cold. Well, all of these things, okay, so when there has been some level of, let's say, arguments, emotional distance, stressful life situations, it does impact cortisol levels, okay? Cortisol levels, and it impacts that in terms of stress levels into adulthood. And if you've been born into your sensitivity, that becomes exaggerated, okay? So cortisol levels are your stress. That is what kind of comes out the radiators, okay? It comes out the radiators, which when that is unmanaged, it can create absolutely obsessive stress, where you're feeling unable to let things go, and very much stress related behaviors, even depression, okay? Now, maternal cortisol is also a factor, and it's, again, there are countless studies that show this, where maternal cortisol is also a factor. Maternal cortisol means your mother's stress when she was carrying you. Now, if you think back, even, a generation or two, there's a whole generation born with a big dollop of stress. People were born through wartime, world wars, all of that kind of stuff, which is going to have an element of maternal stress, even if you have perfect foundational experience. So maternal cortisol is absolutely a factor. Okay, so studies show, and this particular one that I'm going to reference is one that was conducted, I think it's Southampton University, by Dr. Barker and Dr. Thomas Fleming. And what they were able to show is through studies using sheep. Obviously, it's a bit tricky to use humans, but using sheep, monkeys, and rats, that maternal cortisol is directly transported across the placenta and enters the fetal system, so the baby system, through the exchange of blood. Okay, so meaning also that if you came in and your environment was stressful, and your mother was also stressed when carrying you, it will have sent be stressed signals through into your life. So it would have been something that your system has been wrestling with for a long time. Okay, but again, I'm showing you quite clearly that this isn't your fault. Okay. Now, I had all of those things as a child. I had every single one of them. Okay, I was obsessive. I showed very strong stress-related behaviours, and I now know, which I hadn't realised until a long way into adulthood, that I had very strong symptoms and significant symptoms of depression for many years as a child. And again, for me, I had someone rather than something messing with my thermostat. Okay, and I spent the vast majority of my early life not just a little bit frightened, completely terrified. Now, my choice was in that adult experience was to start noticing the girl in rags. Okay, which was it was a visual representation in my mind. Now, I believe these experiences started to save me from stress rather than create it. Now, the girl in rags, it was something very much I saw it in my mind. It's not something I saw it in the external world. And sometimes you have these experiences where part of your brain, and you could say it's your right hemisphere, is showing you connection elements to try and help you resolve something, rather than throwing it in there as some random thing or something that to be frightened of. I think for many, signs that you have been ignoring, are actually things that are trying to highlight a ways and means of resolving something, and you mistake it as a cause of an issue rather than a part of you trying to show you a solution to it. And events in life are there to show you what needs to be looked at, not to avoid dealing with what initially feels uncomfortable. So for most people, as an example, seeing a girl in your mind when, as an adult, vividly, really vividly, this picture doesn't do that justice, but really vividly, who doesn't speak, just stares, is in rags, and is outright scary, and anyone would find that as an outright scary kind of thing and start to question their own sanity. It's not that everyone has that kind of connection with your inner world, or the beginnings of that connection with your inner world, as a visual expression. Some people have it through more of a feeling expression. Some people have it more as some people can have it as almost a sort of a sound expression. Doesn't mean to say that you start hearing voices telling you to do things, but it's more of a kind of a deeper inner voice experience that you can't really quite put your finger on. Okay, so not everyone has it as a visual experience. When you start to actively work on your inner world, this was as a result of, the girl in rags began at a point when I started to work on my inner world. Okay, mine just happened to be visual, which then just, it seemed to be that I was just noticing this image and I didn't know what it was, okay, what it had to do. But this image started the process of calming down the inner world enough to reduce the stress pounding through my body, okay? And it started that process of calming down the inner world to this kind of extent. Now, my next step, though, was to start to talk to her, okay? And this was a few years later. You might think, how did you know for sure it was your cortisol levels? How do you know for sure that when you can't let things go and they're whirling around your head and all of this kind of stuff and you're obsessing over something and you've spoken to a dozen friends and nothing seems to calm it down? How did you know, Heidi, that it was your cortisol levels that was spiking and going all over the shop? Well, a few years later, I actually had my cortisol levels tested. I'd been exhausted, hyper emotional, yet at the same time numb. Okay, it doesn't mean to say that you think, oh my gosh, I've got to go and have my cortisol levels tested. It shows in things in your external world. And as I say, with that HPA access running on with something fiddling around with the thermostat in your internal hallway, it becomes a level of intensity. So yeah, a few years later, I did have my cortisol levels tested, and I did because it was suggested, because I was exhausted, hyper emotional, and at the same time feeling very numb. So the thing is, for this particular test, okay, and this is where it gets quite grim, you had to spit in a tube, okay, several times a day. And quite honestly, just the thought of doing that probably spiked my levels, because, and there's a lot of people on this session and I'm admitting this, I have a massive vomit and saliva phobia. Yes, and I do know where that came from. If you think, well, what, that's a really bizarre phobia to have. And I know where it came from because the girl in rags told me, okay, and I'll tell you in a minute how that came about. But the saliva phobia means that for this particular test, yeah, I would spit in the tube, hand it to my husband and run outside in case I was sick. And I'd have to run really fast. Now, the trouble was, on one occasion, I glanced the tube and he thought it was hilarious. And he just made it to the back door and got it open. This was all very tricky because at the time, the law of attraction works in mysterious ways. Okay, I also had a cat who highlighted this issue. And it's amazing, and you will see that in your own life when something is trying to show itself and how it then becomes a highlighted issue. Okay, now this cat was always being sick. It was so regular that he used to go out the same time every morning, and you'd see him, look out the window, go, oh, there he goes. He trot across the road, make his way, and I didn't know this for a long time, otherwise I was mortified when I knew this. I did used to wonder where he was going. Make his way across the road into a neighbour's, into the house, and puke in their conservatory. I even heard on one occasion a big bang and a oh one evening, and this was in the times when computers had backs to them, and my husband had plugged in his computer and it went bang, blew up literally, and he electrocuted him because guess what, the cat had thrown up down the back of it. So the cat would regularly leave little piles at home. My husband would come home to kitchen towels, hiding little mountains. Okay, so my point, as far as that's concerned, is that you'd be amazed how the unconscious exaggerates things when it's something to solve. So I started to ask the girl in rags who she was. Okay, now this is the next part of how you look at things. Okay, and finding a part of your inner world that's trying to communicate to calm down what has got out of sync, what's got out of rhythm in your body. The key is to ask it. Okay, what's it there for? So I started to ask the girl in rags who she was. Okay, before I just had these weird images of this girl who just stand there staring at me in rags. I wanted to know why I had this bizarre phobia that no matter what I tried, and believe me, I tried everything. I tried hypnosis, I tried this, I tried that. I couldn't let go of it. Okay, really could not let go of it. And the girl in rags said to me in meditation, she was the child with no voice, who saw everything, remembered everything, and controlled my environment. By that time, yes, I was quite freaked out. She told me, though, that my fear of saliva came from being a very young child, teething, who wasn't comforted. Okay, was teething. I had then become frightened, that as a child, of pain. Okay, so my brain started to associate excessive saliva with teething, with pain. Okay, and then this girl in rags added that whooping cough was the last straw. And I'd actually cared for myself during that time. And I still remember that process of caring for myself during that time, waking up in the middle of the night with yuck and retching. And putting those two together, had created a saliva and vomit phobia in adulthood. Okay. Now, I logically would never have got to that. Not in a million years. This symbolism that was showing in my psyche, it was showing as images and pictures, and saying it doesn't happen in that way for everybody. I could have associated it with something that was dark, or I could look at it what it was about. Okay. Now I thanked her for telling me. Okay. And it was quite interesting because the visual image of this was something that she found very difficult to accept, because she shied away and disappeared. And it took me a long time to realise this wasn't something on the outside of me. This wasn't some kind of weird spirit. It wasn't kind of a girl who visited me or anything. It took me a long time to work it out. The little girl in rags was me. Okay. Took me a long time to realise, because the rags were symbolism. Okay, she was the silent child. She was very much she was the silent child. Okay. Through years of experience, research, and unbelievable transformation. Okay, this silent child has proven to be probably the most valuable, I would say the most malleable probably as well, but valuable part of my inner world experience. Okay, and not only for myself, but also the people that I serve. I've come to realise that the silent child is the one that's responsible. Okay, it's the one that's responsible for you obsessing and feeling unable to let things go. Now, the more unheard this part is, the more it will try and show you its presence by highlighting an imbalance. So instead of trying to make something work that isn't working, such as the friendship where they use you, and if you're not seeing that in your own life, you're certainly seeing it in people around you, and you can see their silent child in operation as far as that's concerned. Or the relationship where you have no idea where you stand. Instead of trying harder to make them like you. When you ask the silent child within, it answers, okay? The silent child is not the inner child. So don't think that the silent child is the inner child. The inner child is playful, okay? That's a playful aspect of who you are, and it's a playful aspect of what to be encouraged. The silent child, what it is, it's insightful, very insightful. It knows everything, okay? It doesn't make things shiny. It doesn't pretend. It knows everything. It's got a deep wisdom, and it knows everything that's ever passed through your consciousness in terms of your current life experience, okay? It has wisdom, but, and there's a big but here, it's also vulnerable, okay? Therefore, because it's also vulnerable, it seeks to protect you for survival. And it's silent because it wasn't allowed expression, okay? It wasn't allowed expression in its early life experience. This is the part of you that is tucked away, still in there. You might be an adult now, but it's tucked away and it's in there. And it wasn't allowed an element of expression. That's why it's silent. That's why it has to show itself through other behaviours. Why you can't let things go. Why you've got something bouncing around in your inner hallway. Its idea of protection, though, may be to create for you an intense fear, sabotage for you as the adult. Why does it do that? Why does it want to do that? Because it doesn't feel parented, okay? It feels someone or something is in your hallway messing with the thermostat, but there isn't an adult inside to stop it happening. That's what it feels, okay? That's what the silent child feels. It doesn't feel parented. It doesn't feel that there is anyone in there protecting it. So therefore, it has to do its best to manage that, where it feels that something or someone is messing with the thermostat, but there isn't an adult inside to stop it. So you then feel stuck, okay? An unparented silent child will default to survival. So to your adult self, it's chaos. So that all those times when you thought, well, hang on a second, what am I doing? Why am I going in this direction? It doesn't make sense. What am I doing? Why am I sabotaging? What? Why? What am I doing? Well, the silent child is directing things, okay? So its default is to survival. To your adult self, that's absolute chaos. You can't make progress then. And you feel stuck and you go round and round in circles. And then guess what happens? Your stress levels go woof. Okay, they climb. Give you another example. Okay, this is a story of Amanda. Amanda is exactly the same as you. She's a dedicated circle member. So, you know, some of you may not be circle members, but she is a dedicated circle member. And she's done lots of inner work, yet she was going around and around in circles, and has been for quite some time. I've heard about these sort of things that have been going around and around in her life for quite a long time before she actually asked me to, or was able to ask me to assist her. And she asked me as a one-to-one, on a one-to-one basis, and a one-to-one client. It was only actually the other day, but I think this is a perfect example of how you do this. To help her work out why she was having such problems with contractors, okay, that she was working with contractors. She works within furnishings and stuff like that, and she's designing something and having issue with these contractors. They had given her what she felt to be an inflated bill, an unexpected bill, okay? But every time she went to speak to them about it, she became absolutely terrified. So this has been going on for a while, and it was swimming around, and she couldn't let it go. Absolutely couldn't let it go. Okay, it didn't make any sense because usually she's more than capable of resolving and confronting issues. So when someone, what I've come to learn really is the first point of call when someone has a dilemma like that. Okay, so when someone's got a dilemma of those kind of things, like well, something's not fitting, something's not going right, adult self would absolutely, deal with this and confront it and deal with this in a sensible route. Why am I behaving like this? Doesn't make sense. I've come to realise, okay, that the first point of call is to look through the eyes of their silent child. And I've had a silent child knocking around for a long time, okay, and I know mine very well. So mine works very well with looking at somebody else's, okay, and looking at how somebody else is trying to communicate or operating, okay. And I've come to learn very much that the first point is to look through the eyes of their silent child, because when something doesn't make logical sense that involves a communication issue, bearing in mind that the right brain, so your right hemisphere, communicates, and it's also where higher levels of stress are based in the right hemisphere. Why? Because your nervous system is developed through the right hemisphere, okay? And that when something shows up and it involves a communication issue, often it's the protection methods of the silent child feeling unparented inside the person, okay? So Amanda's silent child showed itself as very young at the time, it was very young. It spoke of a time of feeling abandoned when very young and intensely confused. Now, it transpired that Amanda had been very sick when she was about 18 months old, okay? And quite often you can see or come across the energy of the silent child. As I say, it doesn't always show itself visually, but you can feel it. You get a kind of a feel of looking out through the eyes of someone at a certain age point. And for Amanda, it was 18 months old, and it transpired that she had spent time in hospital. During that time, her parents had moved house and her brother was born. Okay, those are big things, big shocks for anyone, had known a small child. Now, nothing had been explained to her. Okay, it was quite clear that nothing had actually been explained to her. No one had thought to. This is the thing that often happens with, with young children, is that no one thinks to explain something. Okay, I think that's a lot more the case now, where people do kind of sense to explain things. But for her, nothing was explained. So guess what? She was experiencing that in this adult scenario. Okay, she was experiencing the same with the contractors. No one had explained, they had assumed. Okay, and I mentioned to Amanda that I felt her silent child was showing through feelings, because it was more of a showing through, obviously because it's silent, showing through feelings about being thrown in a cold swimming pool, unable to swim. And I got a very strong sense and a really strong feeling of shock and a kind of freeze going through the body. This, literally the silent child experiencing this or showing this as an issue. And so Amanda told me that actually it had happened. It happened later when she said she was about 7, and she was thrown in, as a funny thing, I think she said by her uncle, into a freezing cold pool, and she wasn't able to swim. Okay, so her whole system had been reminded of the powerlessness, which was now in her life overcoming her when dealing with these contractors. Okay, so in these situations, I've observed the silent child to feel safe to release the grip of survival, because remember, it will hold on to a grip of survival. So again, its grip of survival can be anything, and one of these things will actually absolutely be where it won't let go. Okay, it's holding on to something that's familiar, because it doesn't know what else to do, because no one's in there to come and take care of it, to come and parent it, to look after it. Okay, so in these situations, I've observed for the silent child to feel safe to release the grip of survival, what might be to freeze, lots of times it'll be to freeze, it has to have your adult self move in there, to go in there, to comfort and parent it. Okay, so it's the quickest way for your silent child to feel safe is if part of you goes in to parent that aspect of you. So Amanda did that. Okay, she brought into that room, her inner room, the adult self who's scooped up the silent child and hugged her. Okay, the silent child inside her mind fell into her arms sobbing, and you'd be amazed at how quick there is an experience of complete calm and relaxation, okay, that then goes through the body. I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I've very much seen it in my own life and experience. So Amanda's silent child had been so exhausted and terrified, and literally that was what Amanda had been feeling, exhausted and terrified. Why? Because she'd been fending off someone messing around with the thermostat. Okay, so for the first time in forever, Amanda felt completely relaxed and okay. And it doesn't mean to say that's going to last forever, but in that moment of that connection with the silent child, it begins that process of prolonging the experience of feeling relaxed, calm and okay, where that HPA axis, that inner heating cooling system, calms down, where it stops throwing that temperature up, down, all over the place, where it stops messing with the thermostat, where it stops throwing out cortisol levels, where it stops throwing out stress levels, where it starts creating an inner toxicity because there's too many chemicals flooding your body. Okay, that's when you start to get sick. Not perfect, okay? So not perfect for Amanda, but it felt okay, okay? So therefore it then felt really quite okay for her to speak to contractors or start that process, whereas before it wasn't happening. Okay, it's never perfect because silent child is imperfect, and that's fine to be, and it's an important thing to remember that it's fine to be imperfect. Okay, and I think when you've got a very powerful inner critic, there is a pressure, there's an internal pressure to be perfect, and guess what that is? Why it's in there, that inner critic is so strong. It's because the silent child feels undefended, it feels unparented, so it can't fend off those other frequencies or energies. If you actually listen to your inner critic, you'll find that it's not your voice, it's someone else's. Okay, it may be a very familiar voice, but it won't actually be yours if you really listen and you hear what it's saying. I think often when you have an inner critic, you're too busy listening to the inner voice, to that voice, and trying to do as you're told to it, that you forget that actually it doesn't hold your voice. And that inner critic is often harsh, it challenges the silent child, yet the silent child controls your stress response, okay? The inner critic is the reason that the HP axis runs too fast. The thermostat going up and down, it ruins that flow through the pipes, so through the pituitary, and eventually drains the radiators, the adrenals. And you know what adrenal fatigue is. I'm sure that most of you at some point in your life have experienced, or you're currently experiencing adrenal fatigue, which is pretty much that your radiators have been drained. There's just nothing, there's no output, there's no kind of output, because there's still something fiddling around with your thermostat. Okay, so what's the solution? Well, the solution is developing a close relationship with your silent child. And it solves it. It solves that issue. It stops all of that jumping up and down. It stops all of the holding too tight onto things. It stops the internal panic. It stops the intensity happening. How do I know that? Because I've experienced that. Okay? As you well know, I don't tell you to do things or profess to know things unless I've actually done these things myself. Okay? Or very much in terms of looking at stuff and the research around it. It's most certainly what I've done. I've developed a very close relationship with my silent child. Still there. And when you do that, you become a person who is like me, has learnt to repair. Okay? And in my circumstance, and I'm sure yours aren't the same. I hope yours aren't the same. My thermostat was smashed. Okay, it wasn't just broken, it was smashed. And it was smashed by those who are meant to love you. It becomes more obvious in certain situations. So what I'm saying to you, if you think, oh, it's all right for you, you don't have these things. Okay, you've told us a couple of stories as far as how you have those things. It's okay for you. You're perfectly fine now. You seem, fine in this and life of rose petals. Believe me, my thermostat was well and truly smashed to smithereens. Okay, absolutely, in bits, broken, and my body was breaking. Okay, it started breaking as a child, showing you the whole scenario as far as the eczema was concerned, and the hyperhidrosis, all aspects of severe stress, and also childhood depression, all symptoms of severe stress. I don't have any of these scenarios now. I don't have any of those symptoms. I don't have any of those life experiences now, because I repaired my thermostat. And I repaired my thermostat through that close relationship with your silent child. Now, I said right at the beginning of this session that looking at these things is from a different perspective. I look at things very much from the right hemisphere perspective. And that means using a little bit of imagination. It's not logic. Logic doesn't fix, in my experience, the right hemisphere's trauma. Logic is logic. The left hemisphere can process things in a logical thing and say, oh yes, that makes logical sense, to let go of this, to let go of that, and let go of this. Well, you haven't, otherwise you wouldn't be on this session. And you haven't let go of it because it's stored in your right hemisphere. So it needs a different perspective in order to feel safe enough in your inner world to let go of these things. Now, I'm not saying to you necessarily that you would experience your silent child as a visual image that was very clear and very powerful for me. What I'm saying is that you're capable of accessing that just exactly the same way as I did. But developing a close relationship with that part of you, which for most people, they spend their lives trying to avoid, run away from, never listen. Often the body, in terms of a stress response, is trying to give you a way to solve something, not run away from it. Okay, when you run away from the silent child, it makes itself, okay, it's silent, doesn't speak, but it sure can mess things up in there. Okay, why? Because it's trying to help you survive. So what happens if you don't develop a close relationship with your silent child? Well, in my experience, this is what happens. You remain stressed and confused. Okay, you end up feeling that the same thing is circling, still going around, and you miss out. Okay, you miss out in a big way. Certainly I did. All your decisions in life are based from survival. They're not based from joy. You make all your decisions based from survival rather than joy or enjoyment. And unfortunately, this does happen. You become self-obsessed and you end up in the me world. Okay? And as a sensitive, I don't know any sensitive that wants to end up becoming self-obsessed and end up in the me world. But that's what happens, quite honestly, if you don't develop a close relationship with your silent child. Why? Because everything becomes about survival rather than living. It becomes about, surviving life rather than living life. What happens if you do? What happens if you do communicate consistently with the silent child? Well, guess what happens? Okay, you become confident, able to let things go. You feel less stress reactive, certainly, and you start to get into that experience of being extremely insightful. You also find it easy to communicate because there is that beauty, and there is a beauty, believe me, of the right hemisphere, and it's language. The language of your right hemisphere is stunning. It's a language of imagery, high definition, and deeper meaning. I can honestly say I have more enjoyment in watching or experiencing with people the process of their right hemisphere's ways of showing feeling through imagery, powerful image, really strong things that you go, wow, how on earth does it do that? Maybe, you receive that in terms of symbolism, but you don't necessarily know how to decode it or what it means right now, but you've had that. And maybe you don't know how to decode it because the communication hasn't been strong enough with the silent child. Because I think when the communication is strong enough with the silent child, the right hemisphere communicates well enough with the left hemisphere so that you can actually verbalize what that is. It becomes more of a match inside of yourself. Okay, you then find absolutely that you get to see that language, that beautiful language of imagery, high definition, deeper meaning. It's the best film ever. I'm telling you that for sure. I don't know any film, movie, whatever you want, or whatever expression you use, that's anywhere near what you get to see in terms of the right hemisphere's expression. And you also get to that place where you no longer feel tongue-tied with talking to your left hemisphere, or how do you deliver things into the world where you can then make yourself understood, where all of a sudden people start to get you, understand you, and respect just the way that you are, and you suddenly become clearer, much less worried, a lot less worried. And best of all, very much less concerned with what others think. Now, I like this quote, okay? I like this quote for you to remember and how you look at this as far as your silent child is concerned. The greatest fear in the world is of the opinions of others. And the moment you are unafraid, I'll start again. The greatest fear in the world is of the opinions of others. And the moment you are unafraid of the crowd, you are no longer a sheep, you become a lion. A great roar arises in your heart, the roar of freedom. Love that quote. Hopefully you remember that one. I'll say it again. The greatest fear in the world is the opinion of others. Remember that as well. And the moment you are unafraid of the crowd, you are no longer a sheep, you become a lion. A great roar arises in your heart, the roar of freedom. And I like this quote because I believe it's true, because that lion is the roar, it's the roar of the silent child. And when it's unparented, it feels, your whole world as the adult self doesn't feel like the adult, it feels like you're a sheep, that something bigger, more aggressive is going to pounce on you and shred you. So best cluster in something and become unnoticed. But for you as a sensitive, there is a bigger part. There's the lion in there, the lion part, that wants to feel its own world and feel that nothing is going to, it can just be itself. If you think about a lion can just be itself. It can just, mooch around. If it needs to eat, it'll eat. If it needs to make itself clear, it can make itself clear, and no one's going to mess with it. No one's going to mess with it particularly, unless, and you see in plenty of wildlife programs how sometimes other animals do mess with lions, and it backs off because that animal is shown a greater courage, or its own lion. It's shown its own lion heart. As far as that's concerned, it's shown its own roar. Its own roar has arisen in the heart energy. Okay, and that roar, its roar, is freedom. So, if you're ready, okay, and I'm only going to say, if you're ready, these are some of the ways that I can guide you to find the lion of your silent child. Okay, so, this is something, I'm just going to go through some of the things and the ways in which, can support you as far as your silent child is concerned. Because you might be thinking, well, yeah, I've got one of them. Huh. Yeah, I want to have a communication with mine, but I don't know how to do it, or I want some help with it, or I want some kind of guidance with it. Because, your sensitivity is absolutely your greatest asset, and you're going to keep hearing me saying that because it is. But maybe you need a little bit of assistance or guidance with that. So these are the ways I can help you as far as that's concerned. Okay, so these are ways that you can work with me, or of course, absolutely, you can focus on the silent child yourself. It's a way, if it's resonated with you, I've given you ways, I've given you explorations through my own examples, my own stories, and look, here's proof that there's no eczema on my hands. Ways and means to connect with that, or to see it, or to, even if you've experienced it and you think, oh, that's what that is, to start communicating with it. Okay, absolutely, you can do that on your own. But these are 3 ways that I can help you support your silent child, bring it out, bring it into a form of communication with you. And basically, these particular options, these are just some of the ways to work with me, okay? It really depends on your personal style, okay? How you operate, what your personal kind of style is. Now, you'll have a box come up on your screen, I believe. It's on your screen. And there's 3 different options on there to look at. So the closed groups, just to explain what those are. Well, I don't really need to explain what those are because you can click on the link and it will give you a very clear indication. But closed groups are very much a very solid way for you to progress. But they're no good for you if you're seriously afraid of working with other people. Okay, because obviously you've got to. Closed groups are ways of working with small groups. And also, if you're on the other side of the world, a closed group, we do have people who travel over from the other side of the world for a closed group. That's serious dedication. Then those aren't any good for you, but they are very much a very solid way to progress. Okay, so if you like, the thought or the environment of working with me in an intense environment, I will say, the closed groups there is a level of intensity, there's dedication as far as that's concerned, and there's certainly a dedication as far as I'm concerned in showing you how to access that, and most definitely the silent child. I mean, I do lots of other closed groups, but there is one coming up, which is shortly, which you will find that's something that's really, if you really want to work with this and you really want to access it, you want my help as far as that's concerned, then absolutely I recommend a closed group. But as I say, it's no good for you if you're on the other side of the world, or you're seriously afraid of working with other people, okay? Because there are other options that would be more suited to you. One-to-ones, okay? I do one-to-ones. They are one-to-one, as in I can see you and you can see me, but like this kind of scenario, except I can't see you right now, but on a one-to-one basis I can. We use technology that allows me to be able to see you very clearly, and also get you to fill out some details prior to the session, so it maximizes that time. Now those are suitable if you are a private person. You think, oh, I've got something that's really quite private that I want Heidi's help with, I want Heidi's guidance with, I want her to explore for me, I want her to have a look at. I can look at all kinds of stuff. Okay, but as an example, with your silent child, if you're focusing on that area, then on a one-to-one, because they're only half an hour, it's one thing that you're trying to look at or sort out. And think of Amanda's example. Okay, it's one kind of area to think about and sort out. Doesn't need to say it's always the expression of the silent child, but if that kind of resonates with you or makes sense, you'll understand as far as that's concerned. And the other area, of course, is the course. Okay, Midas recovery. And I would absolutely, and lots of you have experienced Midas recovery and how strong and powerful and highly effective it is, I would recommend first and foremost the course, okay, Midas recovery, because it will begin your journey. It's absolutely suitable for you if you are happy to work through things on your own. It's really suitable for you if you think, okay, in order, I want to do a closed group or I want to do a one-to-one, but I feel like I've got to do a bit of something else first. Anyway, I recommend it, highly recommend it, as a ways and means of beginning that development of the relationship with your silent child energy. Why? Because it's not only, the Midas recovery is not only focused on the silent child, it's also focused on the other aspects that surround that as well, which gives you that process of being able to create that inner parenting, so that yes, all of those things calm down. So the thermostat stops rattling around, or your memories, so your inner world's memory of who has been playing with your thermostat or what's been playing with your thermostat through your life dissolves. Okay, that's how it begins to repair. That's how it begins to that's how you then get the inner world to repair that component. That's what I did, and certainly Midas recovery is really about the process of what I followed in order to allow for that deeper inner world connection. So I would highly recommend that first and foremost, but absolutely the other areas appeal to you. I only have 32 slots a month. Okay, that's a month, it's not a week. I only have 32 slots a month for one-to-ones. So when they are, if you go in and have a look and you go, oh, there's quite a few there, don't be too surprised if they all then suddenly disappear, because once those have gone, that's my slot allowance, and then you'd have to wait and see what becomes available on the next month or so. Yes, we do them for anywhere in the world. No, you don't have to. There's no phone calls involved. You do have to have access to your phone or a mobile device, obviously with a screen, or a computer or a tablet or whatever, because it's the particular technology that I use. Well, it's exactly the same as your ability or way to be able to see me right now. The closed groups they're for small numbers of people. Okay, I do other things as well, but the closed groups are for intense work and intense development work. So if you're really along those lines of thinking, yeah, I'm dedicated towards that, I really want to do that, they're not. It's an investment. Okay, the closed groups there's an emotional investment. It's also a financial investment. So, look through those details to make sure that you think, yes, that gels with me, and yeah, I really want to do that. I'm more than happy, absolutely, to have people on closed groups who feel that they're dedicated to their inner progress. They want a level of inner progress. Even if you haven't been doing it for very long. But the minimum requirement, absolutely, for closed groups is that you're a circle member. Why? Because that's for the integrity of the group, that then how I operate, how I work. Okay, so if you've been a minimum of a circle member, you'll know how I work, how I operate, how I do things, because it's often very different to how you would have experienced things in other environments. People describe my particular style as 10 years of psychotherapy in 10 minutes. So it can be quite, I get very excitable. Because as soon as I found something, I go, oh, wow, oh, look at this, look at that, wow. Ooh. And also it's about facilitating and guiding you to be able to access these things on your own, to find your own sense of your own power and utilize that and bring that into a place where you can find yourself feeling comfortable in any situation, exactly as I am able to do now. Because believe me, I had never used to see my sensitivity as my greatest asset. I saw it as my greatest hindrance. You're always going to be sensitive. The fact is, you came into this world that way. You're wired that way. It's developed through the right hemisphere. It was developed in the womb. There's too much evidence to suggest now that it's anything different from that. Okay, so you're wired in terms of a strong connection to your nervous system, to the endocrine system. So you may as well work with it rather than work against it. And for me personally, I saw that as a ways and means to stop that with my inner thermostat, because it was driving me mad, making me ill. And yes, after a period of time, it really would have made me so ill that I would now find life extremely difficult, very difficult. But yes, not everybody comes, I came from circumstances where there was a lot of emotional, very, very, very strong. I come from a background of very strong emotional bullying, which would never have been acknowledged, and not even acknowledged by me for many years. I exactly the same as a lot of sensitives go through that whole the loyalty aspect. You think, oh no, mustn't acknowledge that, no, because then I'm being disloyal. And so there's all this kind of inner stuff that goes on, and part of that struggle. But developing that relationship with the silent child helps for all that to calm down. Doesn't mean to say that you have to make them pay or make them do this or make them do that, because the fact is people wound other people because of their own inner maltreatment. Okay, and that may have been from their own life circumstances, or it can be circumstances that have been passed as normal through the generations. But for you, as a sensitive, and certainly as an intuitive sensitive, that doesn't make sense to you. Okay, it doesn't make sense to you. You've got that strong instinct inside of you that doesn't make sense, and it needs repair. But you can't repair anything in the external world until you focus on your own inner repair. So I very much hope to see you at one of these things. So either within Midas Recovery, and I really do hope, if you haven't got Midas Recovery, I really do hope that if this session has resonated with you, that you take that opportunity. I really do hope that you do, not because anything to do with me, for you, because what's in there, and I'm going to get all emotional now, it is really what helped me make that that transformation. Okay, and as I say, I do these things to help people who have felt unsupported, even though they've got this really strong raw inside of themselves that wants to do it, wants to make it, but don't know where to start. Okay, it's strong stuff. It goes into the heart aspects of how you solve things, and really that core of the silent child. So I really, if you haven't got it, I really do hope that you choose to participate, or I hope to see you on a one-to-one at some point or another, and I very much hope and look forward to seeing you on something like a closed group. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and I very much look forward to seeing you soon. And remember, absolutely always, that your sensitivity is your greatest asset. Bye for now.